Places for sports are important structures in every city. By far the most popular sport in Europe is football and has been for a long time, so stadiums are nothing new, although they saw huge changes going into the 21st century. Let's take a look at what kind of stadiums were built in the old days and now in the recent decades, what sort of infrastructure is built around them, and how they fit the rest of the city. Meanwhile, our city of Altengrad will also get its brand new stadium in the outskirts. Let's go. Central Europe saw three main booms of stadiums. The interwar period between the two world wars, closer to the second, then the 1950s, early 60s, so around the first half of the communist rule, and the third wave happened in the beginning of the 21st century. Each of those booms have slightly different motivations, and structures from these three waves quite massively differ as well. The beginning of the 20th century saw a huge increase in popularity of sports in general. The Olympic Games were restarted by the end of the 19th century. Football similarly gained popularity around that time. Following the First World War, decisions were made to bring the organized sport events to a whole new level by building huge stadiums at scales never seen before. Sport became a thing of national importance, even a showcase of national pride. It clearly also had military undertones, as the physical preparation overlapped with military readiness. So this required buildings. Let's see them. The Great Strahov Stadium in Prague from 1926 would eventually become, over time, by far the largest stadium in the world, with a whopping capacity of 250,000 people. It still is by far the largest stadium in the world, even in 2025. Unfortunately, it lost that first place because it cannot hold all those people anymore due to its terrible technical condition. Look at the size of it though. The sports ground is as big as 9 football fields, so it wasn't just a football stadium, but mostly a place for sports parades, athletic competitions, but later also for motorcycle races. Its location screams of its monumental motivations. It's on a very prominent place on top of a ridge visible from most of the older districts of Prague. Since it was built in the 30s, there are no huge parking lots, people had to walk to it or get closer on a tram. From 1948, there are these unique, very high-capacity tram stations. This one red with 3 individual platforms with overpasses, and here another one, this one blue, almost identical, but the paths to both are heading to different angles of the stadium to manage the crowds. A very large stadium was opened in Berlin just before the First World War, very early in 1913, the German Stadium, but it was soon torn down because it became the Olympic Stadium for the infamous Summer Olympics of 1936. This new stadium for 100,000 people was an insanely huge structure at the time, made specifically to resemble the ancient stadiums and promote the current regimes of the country. After the war, it ended in West Berlin. Unlike the Strahov Stadium in Prague, this one was not left to its fate, but it was actually reused for football matches and even the 1974 World Cup, for which it was partially refurbished. So it's an example of dealing with the past without destroying the lifeless structure. The stadium, once more, had to be well connected with the city. Berlin already had underground and ground train systems, so the stadium had 2 huge stations nearby very early on. Unlike in Prague, we are quite far away from the city center, so that's the reason for much larger stations. Parking lots were likely added later. Some of these places were additional sports fields. This entrance plaza probably was not a parking lot either. Although Germany of the 1930s already was a car country, so some parking was likely present. Even though I did not find old pictures showing it, cars mostly parallel parked on the nearby streets. What's noteworthy in here is the use of earth walls to construct the spectator areas. This is a common practice since the ancient times. It was continued into the 20th century, which can be seen right here in this amphitheater more clearly. It's an elegant solution for seating, not requiring any complicated structure. A Polish example can be the original Polish Army Stadium in Warsaw. It was built in 1930 exactly for the current Army Sports Club, only highlighting the current societal position of the army and sports in general. There are plenty of other stadiums, large and small, built in many cities around the region in the interwar time period. What is very typical is that we cannot see those interwar stadiums anymore, except those few extraordinary ones. Vast majority were either demolished or more commonly rebuilt into something bigger, something more recent. Clearly, when talking about city stadiums, it was harder and harder to find new places for them, so simply tearing down the old and building a new one in its place makes so much more sense. The next big wave of stadiums was during the earlier times of the communist governments after the Second World War. Sport was very important in the communist times, basically for similar motivations as before. There was a strong overlap with the military, many youth sports groups were tied to it, and many top athletes were part of the army too. Organizing and winning international sporting events was a hugely prestigious matter, something the governments really cared for. The parties needed big places for all sorts of political events. Cities were planned to very rapidly expand, so it was necessary to provide workers with leisure. When it comes to the building styles, there were now two approaches. There were plenty of stadiums, some 20-30 years old, mostly inside the urban areas, that saw extensions or rebuilds like the Prague's Strahov Stadium, which got new terraces. And then the projects mostly followed the current urbanism trends, so to detach them more from the built areas and place them in those large leisure areas as per functional separation trends. Cars, well, still not there yet. Two new mega stadiums were built in Poland in 1955. The Silesian Stadium in the Silesian metropolitan area. It was built on the side of a newly established park, one of the largest in Europe, in fact, built in 1951 on an industrial brownfield. So it is exactly that massive leisure-only area for the city of the future where things are neatly divided. The stadium was built as practically a hole in the ground, with the excavated soil creating a raised slope embankment for viewers, so overall a very simple yet very effective structure. It was a multi-purpose stadium, even hosting motorcycle races. During one of them, a record attendance was broken with 130,000 viewers, despite the stadium being officially for some 87,000. Practically identical stadium, yet slightly smaller, was the 10th anniversary stadium in Warsaw, opened also in the same year of 1955. Both designs apparently were inspired by the Berlin Olympic Stadium. This one unfortunately became abandoned in the 80s due to its technical state, when Poland heavily struggled in those times to finance anything. Interestingly, exactly in the same year of 1955, another similar mega stadium opened in East Germany, in Leipzig, the Central Stadium. Leipzig heavily tried to be awarded the Summer Olympics, so built a whole sports campus based on plans that were already made before the Second World War for a sort of sister Olympic park to the one in Berlin. That never happened, so Leipzig had to wait until after the war, but it's nonetheless interesting that those plans from those times carried over. And another practically identical stadium was built in Budapest, Hungary in 1953, although here the huge spectator terrace was built on top of the usual embankment. This was the People's Stadium, and similarly to Leipzig, it should actually belong to the first wave of stadium because its history goes all the way to the late 19th century and then mostly to the year 1911 when Budapest was chosen to host the 1920 Summer Olympic Games. Those did not happen because Austria-Hungary lost the First World War. Money for the stadium was finally approved after the Second World War, so it took some 5 decades from idea to reality. After this wave, construction of stadiums did not stop, but significantly cooled down. In the meantime, ice hockey or various other ice sports requiring indoor arenas picked up on popularity, mostly in Czechoslovakia. A whopping 20 indoor arenas were built in Czechia alone in the 2 decades following the Second World War. fueling more the popularity of ice hockey and creating the background for all the international achievements in the sport. Although indoor arenas for whatever sports had very modest viewer capacities compared to the outdoor stadiums of the time, they had one architectural advantage. That is, they actually had to be full buildings, so architects could show off. Probably the most famous shape of an older arena is the Spodek in Katowice, the angled concrete flying saucer, but there are also many other unique projects built in the 20th century, all mostly done a little later in the 70s and 80s. After that time period, stadium building significantly dropped off. One reason, money. The communist, later post-communist countries simply ran out of them near the end of the 20th century, especially Poland. Finally, the third and arguably the largest wave of stadium building arrived in the 2000s, continuing somewhat to this day. This wave already had those very old stadiums, 70, 80 years old, and slightly younger, 40, 50 years old to work with. Practically all of those were, by today's standards, not providing great comfort for viewers. They were mostly uncovered with concrete or wooden benches and lacked various safety features. And practically all of them were in really bad conditions after decades of neglect. So we can go back to those projects we have seen before and see their current status. The Berlin Olympic Park, I already said, was partially refurbished in the 70s, but mostly then in 2004, creating new pitch and partially covering the terraces, making it look very modern. Unfortunately, Prague's Strahov Stadium is in its original state, practically near collapse in some places, as a modern purpose was not yet found, apart from partitioning it into smaller football training fields. The structure is listed as a historical landmark, but it's not exactly doing it any good. The Polish Army Stadium in Warsaw was totally rebuilt in place of the older one. This is one example where the new structure has hardly anything in common with the old. On the other hand, the Silesian Stadium's original geometry mostly remained, with new surfaces, vastly improved seating, some new terraces, and a roof. The similar-looking Warsaw's 10-year anniversary stadium was completely dismantled, and even the name did not continue, as the new project is now called the Polish National Stadium, now the largest in Poland. The Central Stadium in Leipzig underwent an especially controversial rebuild into the Red Bull Arena. Controversial because the original stadium was, well, not even rebuilt, not destroyed, covered, masked, or perhaps more cynically discarded, because as you can see, the original embankment for seating is still there. The Red Bull Arena is built on the original pitch, with bridges going from the top of the original embankment into it, making the new pitch much smaller and only reserved for football. The athletics tracks cannot fit anymore. The arena was finished in 2004. Apparently this decision was made because Germany hosted the 2006 World Cup, so needed to quickly adapt many older stadiums. Budapest's People's Stadium is also already gone, this time completely torn down in 2017, quite recently, and the new gigantic Puskás Arena for 67,000 people opened in 2019, just in time for Budapest to co-host the Euro 2020. The largest Slovak stadium, the National Football Stadium in Bratislava, was also a rework, this time of a 1930s stadium, meaning it is much closer to the city center, practically in the broader part of it, as the city in the meantime just grew so much. Nearby, there is also that classic earth embankment style athletics stadium, and you can notice how it's built as part of that typical large leisure area. Anyways, let's now focus on urbanism. The third wave of stadiums was done in the car era already, meaning transportation changed. Or did it? Because if you look at this place, where is the parking here for cars? The stadium itself has underground parking for only some 1,000 cars. By the way, the stadium has capacity for over 20,000 people. Right in front of it is a large bus station. These days it's quite common for fan clubs to order special buses to get their fans to other cities, so that's taken care of here. Otherwise, we are mostly in the city center, so citizens of Bratislava can simply walk to the stadium. Majority of them will get drunk either there or in nearby pubs, so that's certainly a preferable way of transport. Trams are on nearby city streets, and a train station is also not far. This entire place is a sort of sports campus. This inconspicuous building right here is actually Slovakia's largest ice hockey arena. Tram stops right in front of it. It itself offers only some 300 parking spaces below it. Other urban stadiums are quite similar. Let's go back to the Polish National Stadium in Warsaw. Already from the days of the old stadium, there was a train station. Trains apparently bring you here in 5 minutes from the city center. From the opposite direction, there are very beefy tram stops, and all around are bus stops. Since 2015, there is also a metro station underneath the train station. So overall, the stadium is covered by all the public transport options. It does have underground parking for cars. Pretty much all stadiums of this era are built raised with extensive areas down below. Apparently the stadium itself holds 1,700 cars. Just a reminder, the stadium has 60,000 people capacity. There is also now a surface car park. I'm not sure if the parking capacity includes that, but looking at maps, this lot takes around 1,200 cars. And lastly, let's take a look at the stadium that I'm building here in the city, simply because its model is in the workshop and it perfectly fits the visuals, so that's why I chose it. It's the Polsat Plus Arena in Gdańsk, Poland, from 2011 for some 40,000 people. This is an example of a stadium built more outside of the denser city center places. Therefore, the owners did not need to go for the expensive underground solutions, but simply do surface parking, not even fully paved. In the end, the surface taken by the stadium and parking lots is roughly 1-to-1 looking at maps. But even then, the parking has capacity for some 2,100 cars only. Public transport options are therefore necessary. Bus stops are all around the complex, and there is this large tram station done exactly in the same visual style as the stadium's enclosure. What's kind of bad though, as you can see, yeah, the station is huge, but everyone has to use this small crosswalk and tiny paths, so this is not exactly very well thought through. Interestingly, the stadium is very well accessible from this direction on foot and on bicycles, as you can tell by the red cycling lanes through very generous highway underpasses. Paradoxically then, it's the railway here that totally cuts off the stadium for pedestrian access to all of these huge residential districts in this direction. There is a unique train station though, because it's apparently only used for special train service during the stadium events, where trains just go back and forth from Gdańsk main station, bringing in the visitors. Anyways, I think the stadium situation is quite clear now, so let's take a look at what I'm building down here in our city. So as you can see, I am building that Gdańsk stadium, but that's only the building, but the surrounding area is inspired by many different places as well. I started with the parking lots because those kind of need to fit the stadium and obviously the surrounding infrastructure, and I was somewhat inspired by the Polish stadium in Wrocław, if I'm not mistaken, because it also has these stacked parking lots on a relatively small footprint. I guess they just didn't have more space bought for the stadium, so they had to do it that way. I was also taking a look quite heavily at the Allianz Arena in Munich. I know it's not the former Eastern Bloc, but it's kind of a famous arena nearby, and it's just interesting in a way that it's structured around the place. It has a huge parking lot as well. Much larger than the stadiums that we have seen, but it's all covered. It's not exactly underground, it's a parking garage, but it's covered by a park, which is really large, and it's actually the main entrance to the stadium as well. So there are public transport options, but they do not stop in front of the stadium immediately. You have to walk some distance towards the stadium, and that's exactly what I also wanted to do right here. So In this place, we already have a train line, a newly established train line from the 70s, I think, or late 60s, something like that. And it was just built to serve this residential district. But since the railway is just going nearby in here, it just makes so much sense to build a new train station. I always wanted to build this particular train station right here for the residential district, but I just wanted to wait. I just wanted to expand the district with something, and now the opportunity really presented itself really well with the stadium. So there is the station now. And this is exactly the inspiration from the Allianz Arena, where the train station or metro station is quite far from the stadium itself, most likely to manage the crowds a little better, because obviously when people are getting from the stadium going home, then it wouldn't really be safe to just have the platforms right next to the stadium's entrances, because people pouring out would just be, blocking the platforms and just pushing the people to the platforms more and more, and that would not really be safe. So it's just so much better to just like dilute the crowds on some larger plaza or larger entrance to some kind of a station. That's exactly what I'm doing right here, and it just makes perfect like geometric sense in this area as well, because this really was the only place where I needed to, or where I could build that train station, and it already is some distance from the stadium, so it just fits the location. Now, when it comes to the parking spaces, like I showed you, the stations, or sorry, the stadiums around Central Europe, they don't really have a lot of parking. So what I'd build here, people on the stream were kind of confused, thinking that I went a little too crazy with the parking spots, but it is in line with some of the stadiums we have seen around here. Not the urban stadiums, the ones inside cities, but we are not inside a city. So what I'm building here is actually more or less in line with the Gdańsk Stadium, for example, because that one is not in the city center, it's more in the outskirts, and the parking spaces, as we have seen, take up more like a one-to-one area or footprint of the entire complex of the stadium. So that's pretty much exactly what I'm doing right here, even though it's even smaller slightly, because I did those stacked parking garages like at the stadium in Wrocław, like I mentioned. Now, I counted it, and I built apparently something like, I have it written down here, some 1,200 parking spots visible on the surface, and down below there might be like another 600, 500, something like that. So that's almost exactly the same numbers as the Gdańsk Stadium. So that's perfectly in line and very realistic in that regard. So yeah, sure, the parking spots do look kind of big compared to some of the stadiums that we have seen, but well, we are not in the city center. There is the space, but most people will arrive using the public transport anyway. This is probably going to be some kind of like a national stadium in Altengrad. Altengrad is a capital city of its country, so this is probably the stadium where, the international matches are going to take place. So people are going to arrive to Altengrad from various different cities or villages and towns around the country. So it makes sense that it has the parking lot facing the highway, because most people from those different cities will probably arrive on their own using their own vehicles. So that's just, taken care of right there. There are going to be also bus parking lots or stations. This one smaller, right next to the stadium's entrance, for for fans or VIPs or something like that. There's also a couple of offices there at the back, which is probably where the players or staff are going to arrive from. And overall, there are just multiple access points to the entire complex. It's also like a general sports area, so I included some training fields around and a couple of tennis fields, really, to just provide a different color there with those different surfaces and enclose it all in this nice green area. Obviously, the place is new, so I'm going to make the trees small, and I'm going to grow some of the trees in the nearby districts. Don't worry, I'm not forgetting about that little detail. It all must be functional, so I'm going to provide the pedestrian paths. By the way, this project was already huge. I planned it to take me maybe just a couple hours to build it. Obviously, I completely failed with that planning, like I always do. So I decided to only keep that train station as a as a torso, so it doesn't have some of the, for example, ramps for people who cannot or won't use the stairs, and these kinds of amenities around it. You know, it's lacking a lot of detailing as well. I'm going to put some decals, dirt decals around it to make it look like it's still a construction site, a work in progress. So don't worry, I'm going to expand the train station actually in the next episode, because we are going to fill some of those gaps near the train station. Right now it's just there because I just needed to connect it to the stadium and establish it, but it's not finished by any means, okay? I just wanted to focus on the stadium, finish the stadium. So there it is. That's the stadium. That's the entrance to the stadium, the huge plaza. I built some events generators right there at the plaza. You can see those tiny little dots there. Those are all the visitors to the stadium. Right now, I completely forgot to switch on the realistic parking to make the parking lot a bit busier, a bit more filled with people, but hey, it happened. I also, as you could have seen in the time lapse, because the stadium, it needs to attract people, like gameplay wise, so I just filled it with lots of those office cubes, each for 20 workers, I believe. And I put, I don't know, countless in there, really, in each one of those windows down below the stadium, one cube. So there are a lot of jobs in this place. And as you can see, the highway is super busy already, lots of people going into the area. By the way, there's the highway interchange. But that's not the only highway entrance into the parking lot. There's also this like a bypass. We are coming to it in the cinematic. There's like this bypass around the gas pump there, around the Pyramid Casino. So that's another highway exit, more like from the city, and there is then like a loop for exiting the stadium, just merging with the exit from the gas pump as well. So there are multiple entrance points really to the stadium for cars, for people, for buses, for everyone. This is how it looks with the overall picture of the new district. So yeah, it's huge. This is exactly the reason why I picked the Gdańsk arena, because it's just standing out very well. It's very distinct looking at the entire city. I really did not want to build any other arena, any other stadium. The color is just perfect in this place. It's like a little sun on the side of Altengrad. And eventually it's going to be enclosed with many more building projects, many more greenery, many more like forested areas as well as we continue building around here. So it's going to feel much more complete. Well, anyways, we are going to continue working on this area, and the next episode we're going to take a look at the prefabs some more, so stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching this episode, guys. That's going to be all. If you liked it, then please do all the things below the video. You know the drill. I'm not going to bore you with that. Big thanks to channel members. Take care and goodbye.